So, who is Black Lives Speak? We are concerned activists. We recognize the momentum sparked by George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others. However, we fear that momentum will and is dying out. We do not need more deaths to create actionable change. Thus, the birth of Black Lives Speak. Black Lives Speak is a monthly forum where invited guests speak on a designated topic. The purpose of Black Lives Speak is not to only highlight our lived experience, but to set and keep actionable goals each month. Black Lives Speak serves as a sounding board and accountability group for Black people everywhere. Today, we are joined by 6 guests. Let's all introduce ourselves and our pronouns. So, as I said before, my name is Shon. My full name is Shon Harris. My pronouns are he, him, his, and currently I am my senior year at the University of Michigan.
I can go next. I'm Mila. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a senior at Duke University.
Hi, my name is Karrington Kelsey. I go by he, him, his. I am a teacher. I am an activist. I'm a member of a community that's just trying to fight for survival.
I am Josiah. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a senior at the University of Michigan as well.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Harris. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I just attend LCC. I have done a couple of things. I currently own a YouTube channel talking about and enculturing Black lives. So.
My name is Johnna, she, her, hers, and I'm a senior at Duke University.
Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. So today's topic is about Blackness. What does Blackness mean to you? Everyone's Blackness is different. To portray Black people as a monolith, as the media often does, is very problematic. We have come here today to talk about our individual experiences with being Black in America. So let's jump right into it. What does your Blackness mean to you?
So, with that being said, just set a couple ground rules. Is everything okay? My computer lagged for a second. Can you see me clearly? Hear me clearly? Okay, cool. So, just to set a couple ground rules, there are spaces where people may get interrupted. That's a part of the talking process, but also at the same time, we need to be clear and mindful about how that happens. So there's a difference between like having a conversation and being interrupted to be combative or gaslighting a person. You know what gaslighting is literally just poking fun at someone's statement or trying to get a rise out of them emotionally, or being dismissive. And with that being said, I think this needs to be a space where we need to be clear about our ideas and think, but also there will be opposing ideas in this space, right? So we need to accept, reject, or suspend our own judgment. I hope that we talk one at a time, but you know what happens with Black people when we talk. It just happens. We tend to overtalk each other, but I think that we need to be clear that this conversation wants to be in a space of growth mindset. So we are not here to downplay anyone, not here to overtalk anyone. I think specifically us as Black men in the room that we need to listen to Black women when they speak. And that needs to be something clear. Also, when the most affected person in the room that may be a part of whatever community speaks, we need to take a step back to understand exactly what they're saying and not overshadow them. Are we all in agreement with that?
Yep.
Cool. So the question is, what does your Blackness mean to you? It doesn't necessarily have to be like a 5-page monologue. Blackness is vast. I have many ethnicities within the Black diaspora. Myself, I am half African, half African American, but my mother is Creole. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, some of my Van Dyke hood life, but then on top of that, like I grew up in a 2-parent household. So many different nuances there. So let's try to get to storytelling about what does our Blackness mean to each one of us. Oh, also, if you take yourself off of mute, I will assume that you are the person speaking.
I guess I can start so what Blackness means to me, it's like existing on the intersections of different identities and being exceptional just by being alive, but also people looking at that exceptionalness as a threat. And so it's constantly being combated. I'm a Black woman. I'm also an Afro-Latina woman. And I'm first generation American. And so kind of living in that experience has made Blackness been very interesting because I've seen it iterate in so many different ways and in so many different spaces with so many different languages. It's one of those things where I know that if I see somebody who's Black, they can relate to an experience of feeling different in the society where Blackness isn't really accepted, but knowing that our life experiences will still be different and that we can relate like almost like we're family, but not exactly because we're different. So it's like having a story to tell, having things to share with people. It's culture. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, Johnna brings up a really great point about being first generation. I am first generation on my father's side specifically, so like only half. But even just being at family meetings, and when they say Black, they don't mean Black, they mean Black Americans. And when they're talking about Black Americans, they don't always have positive things to say. And just like dealing with that reality within your own family is a big part of Blackness for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the intersections that we sit on. Um, Earlier I mentioned that I'm a half Malian, half like African American, but my mother is Creole, so like that's another version of Black American that is like a subset of like Haiti, and like all these other things. Thinking that my mother is Southern too, because even though she is Creole, but she was raised in Alabama, and we can think about like all these places that we sit on. So my mother, when she moved up here and met my father, she was a rough country girl. She wasn't the princess that my grandmother expected my father to marry. She didn't go to the cotillions. She wasn't one of the people. She wasn't a Jack and Jill Black person. That's what it was. She was a rough hood girl from the South, and just thinking about that, like how when we want to meet in these places, that tells the story of our Blackness and creates another narrative or another chapter within it. Um, so that's kind of what we need to kind of explore while we're doing this. Not to say Johnna or whatever you're saying, like not to say any of that was wrong or anything. Like I appreciate it full heartedly. I just wanted to raise that up.
Well, for me, had to think about that one, and I was like writing down like notes for myself ferociously because I was like, what does that mean to me? Obviously, like my understanding of it is changing. Um, in dark of like recent events. But I think like one being Black means like learning to like expect the best for yourself and of yourself. So I think like subconsciously, in different aspects of the Black community, you kind of just like tolerate being treated as less than, so you tolerate the idea that you'll have to work twice as hard to get like the same thing from someone else, or that someone else could get from not working as hard. You tolerate the idea that like you should expect to be like mistreated in certain spaces, um, and like this mindset isn't something that like I realized that like only I had, or like that was like somewhat unique to the Black community until I started like associating with other groups and like looking at their approaches to conflict. In my opinion, like the other groups were like self-entitled almost. They like expected things to go a certain way, and like that would like throw me off guard because I would go like, oh my gosh, you're like yelling at this like this figure, this like not necessarily authority figure, but like superior figure or like other figure, because like you expect the world to operate the way that you want it to way more than like I do and I ever have. And then another part is understanding the historical like cultural distinction. So like when I look at like most groups, or no, literally every single other group that was ever oppressed in like the history of the world, no group lost their language in the process of being oppressed. And like it's to my understanding that like language is the vessel of culture. With the culture comes like what makes people, I don't want to say what makes groups of people unique, um, so like in working in like other advocacy spaces, I had to like ask myself like, oh, okay, like this is great. I'm learning about like their culture and their history and their culture and their history and their parents who are immigrants or their parents who fought through this war or grandparents who fought through that war. But at the same time, I'm like looking at myself and then like realizing like, wait a minute, like that history is completely missing. Like I can't point to a language and say something in like my home language, nor can I talk about like a historical relevance. And I'm not like saying that from like a point of defeat, because I think there's something special about like being able to do more with less, and I think that it's easier for communities to like overcome challenges when their culture is intact because like they have some sort of common thread. That's like not something negative. Yeah, I've like it's impossible to like not notice that like the Black community has managed to like overcome those challenges despite not having what like many cultures deem as essential to like communicating values and whatnot.
I guess I should
Oh, I'm
talk.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just
Um,
wanted Josiah to like explain what type of advocacy work do you do?
Yeah, so I'm like really involved on like my campus with like different identity groups. So like literally whenever something happens in like the political sphere at the University of Michigan, I like either know the people leading it or like the people who are second in command. And that's just because like I try to get involved in as like many, well not as many. Well, it's not that like I purposely try to get involved in as many advocacy spaces as many advocacy spaces as possible. I just like notice like patterns and like oppression, discrimination, persecution, and then when I see them happening in like other communities, I'm like, oh, I can speak against this and I should speak against this because like I know what this feeling like is. I know how it feels to be other. And then also strangely enough, and again, this is something that I didn't learn until recently. It's like for me, it's like way easier to like advocate for like other people's issues and like to advocate issues that like affect me only or slash directly as a Black person. Because like the emotional labor is like way more intensive, like when you're showing up to a space as an ally, there's like a huge burden that like you don't have, so I was able to like, kind of function in all these other spaces and be like in a position to advocate, but then when it came to like issues that were affecting the Black community, that's where I had to like take a step back and breathe. And I noticed that like every single conversation was like way more exhausting. But I also realized that like, some of the things that I was willing to do for other groups, I wasn't really willing to do like for my own group, not because I was like actively saying like, no, I'm not going to do this, but because there was like a subconscious psychological barrier, I guess like the best acronym or analogy I can use, sorry, I'm plugging the microphone, so after this, I'm going to stop talking.
Oh, that's good. I was just getting ready to cut you off too. I was like, sorry, but no shade. But Brooklyn was about to speak, so we're just gonna go from there. Thank you so much for everything you've given Josiah. I really appreciate it. It's really valued here.
No problem. Go ahead, Brooklyn. Sorry.
oh, it's okay. So I said, being Black to me is about being intelligent and troubled at the same time. It means to be of an African descent, a lineage that you come back from. Your extends back to Africa. We come from very powerful people. It means to be descendants from kings and queens, and it means to be proud of my history and my culture, and to know that in certain situations I might be the only, and I might be uncomfortable at times, but I think there's a strength in that where I can overcome, or where people can overcome from just being the onlys, or just being there.
Thank you. That's dope. So we construct these things like what's going to be our story? What is our Blackness, right? We have to think about the trials, our triumphs, the greats who came before us, and what does that look like to us? Because we have all these like examples outside of MLK and Malcolm X, because those are the main who we get fed in school. But like Sojourner Truth, Zora Neale Hurston, like Langston Hughes, even John Brown, which is the white man who said the only way that we're going to destroy slavery and the structure of slavery is by burning everything to the ground. He armed black people with guns, with torches to fight back, and he inspired Harriet Tubman. So when we construct these ideas of what it is to be black and how, like, what does it mean to us and how that is true within us, I want to ask, like, how has your blackness affected the space in which you inhabit? I am a black kid from the east side of Detroit. I moved up to Lansing, Michigan, and like I've never seen so many white people a day in my life. The only time I had white people in my life is if you were a teacher or a police officer. Other than that, like my whole life was black. And moving from one of the blackest cities to like the capital of Michigan, really had me like, it was in a space where like a lot of times I didn't have to think about my blackness. I realized the only time I think about my blackness is when I saw like other people who didn't look like me on TV. Or I saw like other people saying narratives about black people that even though like I grew up in the hood, I didn't experience that. And how we value people, and even learning how to change the way that I talk so that I can be more palatable for my white counterparts when I apply for jobs, when I was working within school, changing it, some forms of my vernacular to fit in. That is a form of us building our stories and like how those things have affected our blackness. Johnna, I'm really interested, like the Afro-Latina perspective of it, of it all, because I think we have a lot of erasure of the Latinx community within the diaspora. Would you mind touching on that? Like, what is your version of blackness that I may not have as an African American? So,
Yeah, I really think that question is like really great because it just got me thinking about all the different spaces that I've had to occupy in life and just how like every space that I've had to be in has had a different impact on how I view blackness, or even just how, my experiences with other people. In terms of like the Afro-Latino part, I'm Honduran, of an ethnic group called Garifuna, and the Garifuna people are black people in Honduras who have ancestry that can trace from West Africa and from indigenous people of Honduras and stuff. So it's in a Honduran context, it is also a marginalized group. And so it's interesting because I don't speak Spanish. And so because I don't speak Spanish and I'm also darker skinned, when I would enter into spaces where I was with other Latinos who weren't Afro-Latino, it would just be a little bit difficult because it was constantly a question of like, oh, are you really Latino? Like that doesn't actually you don't look Latino, like blackness doesn't exist in this context. And I think even when I was, in black spaces, I remember when I was a child and growing up, I'm from the Bronx. And so, all of basically my whole world was black growing up because like, it's the Bronx. And so I remember going to school and having, conversations with other black kids, and it just be like, I'm Latino. And a lot of people thought I was lying. And it was interesting because I think that experience kind of made it very apparent that there are certain narratives that aren't being told about blackness to both outside of the black community, but even within the black community, where there's like this idea of like the monolithic black person. It within the context of the black community is interesting because, to talk about being a Latino, a black Latino, it was like inconceivable. And I knew a lot of people who would actually make up to say that they were Latino, like as an excuse to be like, oh, I'm ethnic, I'm exotic, I'm different. And so when I would say it, people thought I was lying to make myself seem cute or something like that, which I thought was a very interesting experience, especially because like it reminded me of just how conversations about beauty and moving as a black woman in the context of beauty, where there was I remember there's a whole period about like around like when I was in high school where it was like, oh, foreign chicks only, or like, those different like hashtags and stuff like that, where it was like the idea of being black mixed with something else or being less black of some sort was kind of used as like a oh, like I'm important, I'm beautiful because I'm not completely Black. And that was the one thing that was a little bit harder for me, just saying that I was Latina, because I didn't want to say it sometimes because I didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to cut down on my Blackness, even though I'm still Black in that space. So that's why like now, like I kind of just lead with that because I want people to know, like, you know, Blackness and Latinxness looks like this. You know, it looks like dark-skinned people. It looks like people who don't speak Spanish. It looks like people who are not in Latin America, you know. So that was the one thing about just moving within those spaces that was interesting. And just even kind of bring it back to the question that you had asked before of like, how is Blackness affected like the spaces you can kind of be in. I went to a predominantly white and Asian high school in the Bronx because New York school system is actually very segregated, and I had to test into my school and it was only 2% Black. And it was interesting being in that space because it was one of those experiences of like I felt almost like a traitor to a certain extent because I'm in a school that's in my borough that most of the kids who go to the school they don't even live anywhere near there. They don't look like me. Anybody who is remotely close to me, any experience that I've gone to, aren't even allowed to be anywhere near the school, you know? So it's like, it was a feeling of like, I don't deserve this, but also I don't want this because I remember being so removed from everything. Like it took me 2 hours to get to school by bus in a borough that I lived in, and I couldn't really see my friends because the schedules was different, and it was a really isolating experience. And then even just being within the school, it wasn't environment that really cultivated my growth as a Black woman. And so it just was a question of like whether or not it was worth it. So that was a very long answer to your question, but yeah, it definitely has affected the different spaces I've been able to
But
move.
it's all valid though. Like, it's all valid. It still rings true.
Yeah, that is really crazy. And it's also crazy because like I have the opposite experience. I'm not Afro-Latina, but I speak Spanish pretty well actually, not to brag or anything. But when I go into a space and I'm speaking Spanish, people are looking at me like, wait a minute, this doesn't match what we previously thought of you. And so like at my nail tech, she speaks like it's a Spanish a Spanish nail salon. I don't know why I forgot that word, but a Spanish nail salon. And everyone, time I go in there, you know, speaking Spanish, everything. And she always like shows me off. She's like, look, she speaks Spanish. Isn't she so good? Isn't she so, to everybody who comes in the store. And so like, it seems innocent, but also she's showing me off because she wasn't expecting it. Everyone's very surprised. Everyone's confused. Like, and that goes right back to what you were saying. I mean, the other side of it, of course, but like the monolithic Black person, and the monolithic Black woman specifically as well.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask if you went to Bronx Science High School.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Brooke, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I could say that I've had a bit of a different experience, just being a lighter skinned Black person. When I walk into a room or when I'm in places, they never expect me to be Black. And I don't know why. They always expect me to be something different. They expect me to be Latino, I get a lot, or they expect me to be white. They never just think that I'm Black. And so in a couple of cases, I've had to sit down with places at work and try to explain to them that, you know, this is who I am, this is where I come from. And I basically work and I go to school, and it feels like just an all non-diverse place at all. And I've had a couple experiences where I would have employees or somebody around me who would say something that made me very uncomfortable, and they would forget that I am of African descent, or just because I try to I don't know what the word would be, would try to like keep up with them in their culture, they would forget about mine. So yeah, it's just in a lot of places, like even at school, or I'm the only Black, and sometimes people forget that. And it's just a really different experience, and I have to sometimes, tell people, like, some things that you're saying to me or some things that you're making references about are very uncomfortable, and yeah.
So from us talking about this experience, I feel like the question of erasure has become a thing. So like, how many of us have like felt erased? Like, just put a finger up, hand up. We feel like you've been erased by not only your own community but by others. Um, I know that like with this new like love all skin tones movement, like I'm still trying my best not to be petty. For like remembering when I was called like a tar baby, and like I was called like all these negative things, and like it was also funny because the same girls and like people who like teased me in elementary school and called me all these names were the same ones loving my skin because it became like a trend now, or because my skin had the right amount of like cocoa butter lotion or something on there or something. It was like, oh wait, you only like my skin when it glistens, but because of like the anti-blackness within it, like there's this disconnect, right? So like, has anybody have experience like with anti-blackness within themselves or within, or from like experiencing things with other people? Because as we talked about like how people perceive us before, I know that like my grandmother, my great grandmother on like my mother's side was Native American. So like I used to be like, oh well, I actually do know what tribe I'm from. Like, oh, I actually know what tribe I'm from, and all this other stuff. And when I would say that, people was like, no, you dark skin with nappy hair, don't play it. So like, it's more of a question about, have you ever been erased and experiencing anti-blackness at the same time? And if you need a definition of that, I have no problem saying it.
I think that I've definitely had erasure of my blackness. I did mention earlier that I'm half Caribbean, half Trinidadian to be exact, and especially talking to men, unfortunately that becomes like oh, so you're foreign, and then it's kind of like they're speaking to me differently because I'm foreign. I'm still the same. I'm still half black, like half African American too, just like you. But that foreign thing, it just really is exciting to them, and they erase it. And so then also, I've definitely had an experience where I was, going to a party with a guy, and he was introducing me. He was like, "Yeah, she's foreign." And I'm like, "My name is Mila." And so, like, definitely that erasure of the blackness that I have is just so irritating at times.
Josiah, look like you were going to say something. Do you?
Yeah, I was gonna say that like the erasure kind of manifests itself more subtly now. And again, upon like deeper reflection, all these things like came crashing to my mind. I'm just like, okay, well, screw off my political involvement. But the erasure kind of pops up when having conversations about blackness, there's like this underlying need to connect it to like another issue, So instead of just like only advocating for like blackness and black issues, you have to connect it or like draw an analogy to like a different culture or a different issue. Or if someone else is in the room, they have like other identities, and it's like you're subconsciously like belittling your own identity in favor of like saying like, oh, well, you're this and that. It's like, you must be like more present. It's like, it's like self-erasure. So yeah, and it's like really, really weird because like once you realize that, it like totally messes up the way that you like engage in conversations, including this one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like I think for me, it like has a lot to do with hair. Like I know hair has been one of the things that has like been one of those moments of like erasure and anti-blackness where it'd be like, I remember when I first like started wearing afros and stuff like that, it was like just like at the genesis of the natural hair movement. And I just remember the commentary of like like, you sure you don't want a permit? Or like oh, but like, I feel like if you go to an interview or something, like you should straighten your hair. The pelo malo, that's a term that gets thrown around the Latinx community all the time, and I remember, even in interactions like similar to Mila, interactions with guys, the reaction of hair becomes different because there's been a lot of instances in which like I or a lot of my friends have had like unsolicited suggestions about what they should and should not do with their hair by other men, where it'll be like, oh, but like, could you not wear your hair like this? It doesn't look right. Or like, I think I like it better with this. Like, I remember I had a wig on one time, and at the time, the person I was dealing with was just like, oh, I don't really like that. Like, can you not wear the wig? And I'm just like, that's really crazy because I didn't ask. So it was like certain things like that. And then even just like, I remember certain conversations about professionalism and the idea of like, if you, like, you're already a Black woman, like, you don't want to give anybody else a reason to not want to hire you or not want to deal with you. Like, I remember I dyed my hair pink a couple of years back, and it was just like, why would you do that? Like, you already have so many things, working against you. Why would you do that? And it's interesting because I think that conversations about professionalism and conversations about appearance, like that, kind of like, it's one of those really weird situations about being unapologetically Black, because it's really hard to be unapologetically Black and to be unapologetically yourself whilst being Black, because there's just certain things where if you make certain choices about your appearance, if you make certain choices about how you want to speak, how you want to walk, how you want to talk, how you want to dress, like, people react to you completely differently, and people, you have to face certain consequences for choosing to be yourself. And that's just something that's really difficult. And it's like both that happens like outside of the community, where it's like people will look at us differently because we're Black, but then even within the community, we'll police each other so much, which I think is like both out of like respectability, love, and fear, because it's like you don't want the people who look like you, who you care about, to like struggle. So you'll enforce these rules and these, standards on them, but not really like allowing them to be completely themselves, which is like a really catch-22 type of situation.
So it's funny that we bring up like the idea of like, well, we talk about Blackness and we try to ask for power or gain capital or something like that. We automatically have to ascribe it to something else, right? So I was actually scrolled past this clip on Twitter with Tiffany Cross and Whoopi Goldberg. I'm a Whoopi Goldberg stan. I love Whoopi Goldberg. Like, since before Sister Act, Jumpin' Jack Flash, like the Class Act, like all that. Like, I am a big fan of Whoopi Goldberg. But like in this clip, Whoopi was asking Tiffany Cross, like, well, if Biden doesn't pick, I think, what was her name? It was Senator Duckworth. And it was like basically saying like, well, like, I think Biden should pick Duckworth. Like, how do you feel about like Biden picking a Black woman as like his vice, as his VP? And in the question, like, Tiffany Cross responded like, what's wrong with it? Black people invested everything else in this country. The Democratic Party loves to beg for Black votes so we can become a swing for them. They love being in our neighborhoods, love promising us and stuff. But like, not only is it about defeating Trump at the office, and honestly, I don't know who may or may not be a Trump supporter in this situation. I'm not saying you are, but like, with that being said, like, we have to fight for so much. And what's wrong with Black people saying, hey, we deserve this, give us this, we invested so much into this country, whether it be our spending power, whether it be our education, whether it be our Black bodies for entertainment. We need somebody who is going to clearly reflect our issues and invest it heavily in their communities in the office. So just to piggyback off this thought of like, when we do have to be ascribed to something else, like affirmative action only became a thing when white women were written into it. Like, we have to think about that. So when it comes to like us gaining power as Black people, how do you guys think that's going to happen? And it can be everything, because like, I go from let's community organize to pray to like, oh, well, we got to just start hurting white people property and money for them to actually listen. And like, I don't think property destruction is an act of violence. It's not harming an actual person. So how do you think we will gain capital? Just to surmise it, with the undertone of like, our Blackness always has to come, our power always has to come when it's ascribed to someone else.
So I know there are mixed views about this, and I'm definitely willing to hear more about it, but I'm a big proponent of supporting Black business. I think that we need to support our own community because, one, no one else is going to, and two, that is how we get our power back, keeping our money with us. The average dollar stays in the Black community less than 6 hours. In other minorities, it's like days and days, months, etc. And we have 6 hours. That is ridiculous, especially when you think about our buying power. I think that is a major thing that we will start to see some change because whether we want to admit it or not, money runs stuff. And unfortunately, our community is in a lack of money, and that's something that we just have to deal with. And not saying that supporting Black businesses is just going to make us all very rich, but it's definitely a start. And I think that we need to stop supporting businesses that don't support us. So
I agree with that, Mila. We need to support Black businesses and empower Black voices and Black people in every space in this country.
Yeah, even going off of that, like the idea of like having to like empower Blackness in education too, because I think that one of the things that is difficult about the education system in America, I don't know how it is in other countries, but definitely in America, like there is this erasure of Blackness and this ignorance that is going to continue, because there are a lot of parts of history that are either whitewashed, there are parts of history that are left out completely, and there's narratives that are fed to us from when we are children that we have to unlearn into adulthood, which honestly makes things a lot harder because it's like we're built to function within a system that's not meant for us, and it's like harder for us to make change on how to like actually uplift our community, how to come out of these restraints with the education system essentially working against us.
Which is like, so I have this thing. Sometimes the most cliche things remain true. So we keep on talking about how these structures exist. We already know what they're gonna do. We already know what they produce. We judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, or just by your actions. But it's funny because we can also have discourse in this. Like Mila, I kind of disagree with thinking that Black business or Black capitalism itself is going to save the Black community. Like yes, that can be a conduit, but it's not the whole thing that will get us there. Because when we do focus too much on capitalism, we become we become our slave masters. And I don't want to say that to you as a Black woman, calling you a slave master. That's why I wanted to I paused. I was like, no, this is wrong. But we become them because we use their same systems. Now there are other systems that exist where you can be competitive, where you can build capital within your community and stuff like that and still build wealth, but it doesn't come at the expense of the people who are at the bottom of the totem pole.
yeah, for the record, I am an abolitionist. I think we should burn it all down. But we have to start somewhere, and that's why I'm a proponent of Black business. Just to throw that in there.
Get it together. Yeah, I do believe money is a real thing. It exists. It gains access to things. Josiah, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you could elaborate about some of those other conduits that you're thinking of.
All right. So, so these are me exploring a lot of ideas. So I'm exploring I'm flirting with the idea. No, I'm shooting my shot with the idea of being a prison abolitionist. I am. Every shot I got in the building right now would be in a prison abolitionist, because the idea of prisons themselves were created to catch runaway slaves, to keep them there. And then now with the industrialized prison complex, we have felons making, and I say loosely felons, we have felons making Victoria's Secret panties. They making aerosol cans and stuff like that for pennies. So if we learn to find a place where we can reform people and extend them the offer to become a part of our society in which they are productive, we may find another conduit against capitalism, because capitalism itself is designed to keep the poor and the most affected people at the bottom. Outside of that, it may just be us creating a whole new system. It can be done. It just means that we got to do the work. We got to read. We got to do what. As much as I hate saying it, I've been watching Hamilton too much. We got to do what Hamilton did. We got to write. We got to create cathedrals out of like pen and paper. Like, we have to create well-crafted policy. I know my wife is over in the corner. I'm surprised she's not laughing at this, um, but like, we have to create that same framework to change things. It could be democratic socialism, where like, yeah, the state does own things, but guess who has the power to vote what it's gonna do with those things? The people. Um Also, outside of that, like, we can look to other countries right now. I think a big miss that we have, specifically here in America, is that we're too big. Like, we are, like, each state is about the size of a country. So I feel like there should be some form of like us taking what other countries are doing right now and find a way to implement it and like fit it best to where it puts the people first and not the system. Because right now we are begging and pleading with the system to survive. We're willing to lose lives. We're willing to let people starve. We're willing to let education fall apart. But we're willing to let the system that wasn't created with me and anybody else in this room in mind, like, it doesn't make sense. And I get that, like, Black people aren't the majority of this country, but it's not only hurting us, it's hurting poor white people too. Like, and honestly, like one of my history professors told me a long time ago, Black and brown people were fine during the recession. Black and brown people were fine during the Great Depression because we knew how to survive. It was the white people killing themselves because they lost everything. So that's my long spiel. I would digress and go back to being a mediator. I'm sorry, I'm along with the teacher. It happens. So we're 16 minutes away from the hour mark. So if you could write a letter to yourself about your Blackness, if you could like have a concise 5 sentences to yourself, who you are right now within your Blackness, what would it mean? What would it be?
I think mine would be very simple. Don't let anyone take it away. I think that that's something that I have dealt with for a long time, whether that I've been in primarily white spaces, primarily Black spaces, or primarily different racist spaces. That has been an issue. Erasure has been a huge issue for me. And so I guess my letter would be real short. Just don't let anyone take it away.
Mine would also be pretty short. It would be 2 sentences. You're beautiful and you're worthy. Because I think that the hardest part about just being Black, at least for me, has been beauty, and has been feeling like, because I know that Black is beautiful, and I say all the time Black is beautiful. And I think that, like, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have it any other way, but it's hard to remember that you're beautiful and you're worthy, especially when you're constantly told that you're not. And so I think I would just that would be my letter to myself, and I'd read it every day.
I think for me, I would tell myself to believe in myself, and to keep persevering.
I think mine would probably be to just to remember how beautiful and how strong you are. Um, that would be mine.
Yeah, mine would be what I mentioned earlier about expecting the best for yourself and of yourself.
Mine would be that your Blackness is not conditional. It's not based off of the fact that you feel rooted in your culture. It's not based off of the fact that you feel desirable or that you have to provide something to be Black. It is literally your genetic makeup. No one can take it away from you. Yes, there may be cultural cues, but guess what? That doesn't mean that your version of Black is different than anybody else's. It still is valuable because you want to protect Black lives at all costs. All right. With that being said, like we're winding it down. And let's take a second to really think about like the meaning of creating these narratives. Because the reason why I say specifically creating narratives is because we create these stories for ourselves and we redefine our own Blackness every day with every new experience, with every like memory that pops up out of nowhere. And this is how we fall in love with Blackness, right? You fall in love with who you are. You fall in love with your version of Blackness. You fall in love with your meaning. So that way, when we enter this world, when we practice our things, when we become experts in things besides Blackness, that this is that extra mile, right? I can think about me personally. Like I hope to become a therapist. I hope to become a therapist so I can provide therapy for Black men for free. That's my wildest dream right now. But it's my why. And that all comes back to our key points of who we are and why we do things and what we love. And we have to love ourselves so we can practice that with other people. So I'm gonna open it up for comments. I'm gonna shut up this time. This is about y'all, not me.
Mila, did you want to say something earlier?
Oh, no, I'm in charge of closing, so I was just
Out of curiosity, who are the facilitators and who are like the invitees?
I'm a facilitator. Shon is, and Karrington. And thank you for noticing as well. I appreciate it.
Of course, no problem.
I guess one thing I guess would on like my comment to be really like about Black storytelling and the importance of Black storytelling. So one of my aspirations in life is to be a filmmaker. I am a filmmaker, but I want to be like someone who can actually put stories out there that a lot of people will see. Because I think that storytelling for Black people is so important because it humanizes us in a way that a lot of people don't want to recognize that we're human. And I think that when you can empathize with somebody, when you can see their story, when you can relate to their story, and even when you can see yourself represented, it's a feeling of feeling worthy, of feeling seen, of feeling human. And I think that is so important, especially for younger Black people who are coming into their identity. Being able to shape your identity in a lot of the things that you see is so important. And so that's why I advocate for Black storytelling, and I want to be a filmmaker.
I would say that my comment is like really realizing the importance of breaking down the Black monolith within the Black community and outside of, first recognizing that it happens within the Black community. And then also saying that whatever that monolith breaking down looks like, making sure that we're recognizing all parts of intersectionality, no matter what that may look like.
For me, Karrington, I just really appreciate what you said. Blackness is not conditional. I love that you said that because it's hard questioning yourself if you're Black enough as someone who's Black and Mexican. Part of that, and so that was really, I thank you so much.
Shon, you're Black enough. I promise.
Give my little girl a close shade Black enough.
So if no one has anything else to say, Brooklyn, I'm not sure if you had anything to say, but I can go ahead and close out. So first I want to say thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate this time to talk about this experience about being Black. It really was a great conversation. And the next step is to talk about the call to action for this month. A big part of Black Lives Speak is not only discussing our lived experience, but actually leading to actionable change. So our theme for the month is protect and uplift Blackness. So we've talked about what Blackness means to us, how it is under attack daily, and I've compiled these 3 action items to help lead to change. So 1, create a social media slider highlighting your favorite Black creators. Just really pushing your followers to follow them, just trying to uplift those creators. 2, spend $25 with at least one Black-owned business and highlight them on your social media feed. Or 3, make a thread or highlight at least 10 actionable petitions that have not met their goal to date. So I can repeat those again, but if we could go around the room and all commit to one of these, that would be amazing. And while everyone is sharing, I will also share the feedback form in the chat. Please fill it out. We want to know how we can be better. And it will take less than 10 minutes.
I have to go in a second, but I will commit to spending $25 with at least one Black-owned business. Technically, I bet that today I spent $16 at a
Great.
food, but yeah.
I will commit to doing the same.
I'll also commit to doing the same, and I'll use Mila's perfectly compiled Black-owned business directory.
And I will also be doing the same.
I'll commit to sharing Black figures on my social media.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, I will commit probably to all 3. I usually do this anyways, so copy link. Okay. Bam. So if you guys could copy and paste that and just fill it out, it'll be really quick. Just want to learn how you guys felt about this. This is our first time doing it. But thank you guys so much for your time. This was a really fruitful conversation, and we'll see you guys next time on Black Lives Speak.